Emily's fingers brushed against the spine of an old, leather-bound book tucked away in the farthest corner of the library's restricted section. The gold-embossed title, A Grimm's Forgotten Talus, had long since faded, but something about it called to her. As she carefully opened the cover, a musty scent filled the air, and the pages fluttered as if caught in an unseen breeze. Except there was no wind in the quiet, still library. At first, she chalked it up to her imagination. But then she noticed the illustrations. A painted forest in one spread seemed darker than before, the trees twisting into gnarled shapes when she glanced away and back again. A smiling princess in another image now bore hollow, empty eyes. Emily's breath hitched as she traced the changes, her skin prickling with unease. Then came the sound, a faint rhythmic scratching, like nails dragging across paper. She spun around, but the easels were empty. Yet the sensation of being watched clung to her, heavy and suffocating. The book lay open on the table, its pages shifting ever so slightly, as if an invisible hand were turning them. That night, as she locked up the library, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered behind her, breathing just out of sight. She glanced back one last time, and there, in the dim glow of the exit sign, the book sat on the desk again, its cover slightly ajar. She hadn't left it there. Her reflection in the glass door flickered for a moment, and behind her, a shadow moved. But when she turned, there was nothing, only the book waiting. The whispers began as a faint rustling, like dried leaves skittering across the floor of the library long after closing time. Emily tried to ignore them at first, chalking it up to the old building settling or the wind sneaking through cracks in the windows. But night after night, the sounds grew clearer. Murmurs in a language she couldn't understand, yet somehow felt she'd known all her life. They slithered from the pages of the ancient fairy tale book, the one she'd found tucked away in the restricted section, its leather binding cracked with age. Then came the dreams. In them, she stood in a forest of towering, gnarled trees, their branches twisting into shapes that seemed to reach for her. A shadow moved among them, always just out of sight, its presence heavy and suffocating. The first time she saw its face, or the absence of one, she woke up gasping, her sheets damp with sweat. It called itself the Keeper, and its voice was the same as the whispers from the book. Finish the story, it demanded, its words slithering into her mind like ink seeping into paper. It's been waiting so long. Emily tried to resist, locking the book away in a cabinet or burying it under stacks of others. But every morning, she'd find it lying open on her desk, the illustrations subtly altered. A child's face scratched out, a cottage now stained with something dark and wet. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and soon she realized they weren't just in her dreams anymore. They followed her into the waking world, a chorus of voices urging her to turn just one more page. And worst of all, she was starting to want to. The library's archives were thick with dust, the air stale with the scent of aged paper. Emily sat hunched over a microfilm reader, her eyes straining as she scrolled through decades-old newspapers. The fairy tale book had haunted her dreams since she first found it, its eerie illustrations shifting whenever she blinked. She needed answers. The first article was from 1973, Local Child Vanishes After Reading Library Book. Emily's breath caught. The description matched her book. The same gilded title, the same cracked spine. Another headline, this time from 1985, told of a girl who had disappeared from her bedroom, leaving behind only an open storybook. Each case was the same. Children, always children, drawn to the book's hauntingly beautiful pages before vanishing without a trace. Then she found it. A handwritten note tucked between the files, its ink faded but legible. The Storyteller claims them, it read. It hungers for new voices to weave into its tales. Once you hear its whispers, it's already too late. Emily's hands trembled. The note was signed by a former librarian, someone who had tried, and failed, to stop the curse. That night, the whispers grew louder. The book lay open on her desk, its pages fluttering despite the still air. The illustrations moved, not just shifting, living. A shadowy figure emerged from the margins, its hollow eyes fixed on her. You've seen the truth, the voice from her dreams hissed. Now you must finish the story. Emily slammed the book shut, but the damage was done. The storyteller had noticed her. And it would not let her go. The moment Emily turned the page, the ink seemed to liquefy and shift before her eyes. The once static illustrations twisted into motion, the characters' hollow eyes blinking, their mouths stretching into grotesque smiles. A cold dread settled in her chest as the edges of the paper curled outward, as if reaching for her. Before she could react, the room around her dissolved, swallowed by swirling darkness. When the world reassembled, she stood in the heart of the fairy tale. But it was wrong. The once pristine castle loomed with gnarled spires, its walls pulsating like living flesh. The trees bent at unnatural angles, their branches clawing at a blood-red sky. Whispers slithered through the air, urging her forward, deeper into the nightmare. Emily's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the warped landscape, the ground beneath her feet squirming like muscle. Every turn led her deeper into the story's trap, the paths rearranging themselves behind her. Then she saw it, the keeper. A shadow with no face, its form flickering like a half-remembered nightmare. It moved without sound, always just out of sight, but she could feel its hunger, its impatience. The book's rules were clear: she was the protagonist now, and the story demanded an ending. But the lines between reality and the tale blurred with every step, and Emily wondered if she'd ever be able to tell them apart again. The keeper's laughter echoed through the twisted woods, a sound like rustling pages. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the book, now fused to her grip, its pages whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. The characters she passed whispered her name, their voices merging into a chorus of lost souls. She had to find a way out before the story consumed her completely. But the deeper she went, the more the book reshaped her, its ink seeping into her skin. The fairy tale wasn't just around her anymore, it was inside her. And the keeper was waiting. Emily's fingers trembled as she gripped the quill, its tip dipped in ink made from her own blood. A desperate measure suggested by the fragmented whispers of the children who had vanished before her. The pages of the ancient book pulsed under her touch, as if breathing, the illustrations twisting into grotesque parodies of the fairy tales she once loved. She had to rewrite the ending, to break the curse that had woven itself around her soul. But the book fought back. The words she scratched onto the parchment blurred and rearranged themselves, the ink sinking into the page like water into sand. The storyteller's laughter echoed in her mind, a sound like crumbling paper and distant screams. The library around her had long since dissolved into the book's nightmarish world. A labyrinth of towering shelves that shifted like living things, their shadows stretching into grasping hands. The keeper lurked among them, its form flickering between human and something far worse, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Every time Emily tried to pen a new ending, the story twisted further. Heroes became monsters, happy endings dissolved into tragedies, and the ink itself seemed to poison her thoughts. She could feel the book's hunger, its desire to consume her completely, to make her another forgotten character in its endless tale. Time meant nothing here. Days, hours, Emily couldn't tell. The only constant was the weight of the quill in her hand and the creeping dread that she was running out of it. The storyteller's voice slithered through her mind, offering false promises: just one more line, one more word, and you'll be free. But she knew the truth. The book would never let her go. Not unless she destroyed it. Or it destroyed her. With a shaky breath, she pressed the quill to the page one last time, praying her words would be stronger than the curse. But the book was always one step ahead. The letter she wrote melted into screams, and the shadows around her stirred, ready to drag her deeper. The flames devoured the ancient pages, curling them into blackened ash as Emily watched with a mixture of relief and dread. The firelight danced in her wide, tear-filled eyes, casting long shadows across the library's dimly lit back room. She had hoped this would end the nightmare, that the cursed book's destruction would free her from its grip. But as the last embers flickered, a cold gust of wind swept through the room. Though the windows were sealed, the ashes stirred, swirling into a twisting column of smoke that coalesced into a familiar, looming shape. The keeper stepped from the dying fire, its shadowy form now more solid than ever. The edges of its tattered cloak smoldered, but its hollow eyes burned with an unnatural light. Emily staggered back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "You cannot destroy what is eternal," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers. "The story must be told. And now it is yours to tell." Emily's hands trembled as she looked down at her palms. Dark veins spread beneath her skin, creeping like ink spilled across parchment. The curse had transferred to her. The keeper's laughter echoed as it dissolved into the shadows, leaving her alone with the horrifying truth. She was bound to the book's will. The whispers returned louder now, filling her mind with fragments of stories yet to be written. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her head as visions of children, lost, terrified, flashed behind her eyelids. The book was gone, but its power lived on inside her. And if she could not resist its pull, she would become the very thing she had fought so hard to escape. The fire had not freed her. As the last embers of the cursed book smoldered at her feet, Emily felt the cold weight of realization settle in her chest. The keeper's laughter echoed in her mind, a sound like rustling pages and distant screams. The flames had not destroyed the entity, they had only transferred its malice to her. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now moved with eerie purpose, her fingers twitching as if guided by invisible strings. The shadows around her deepened, whispering promises she could not ignore. She was no longer Emily the librarian, she was the keeper, bound to the book's will. The first victim came to her without resistance, a curious child, drawn by the faint glow of a newly appeared tome on the library shelf. Emily watched, her heart splintering as the boy's eyes widened with delight at the shifting illustrations. She tried to scream, to warn him, but her voice was no longer her own. The book's pages fluttered open, and the child reached out, his fingers brushing the paper. In an instant, he was gone, swallowed by the story. The keeper's satisfaction curled inside her, a parasite feeding on her despair. Nights blurred together as the cycle repeated. Each new reader vanished, their faces joining the haunting gallery of the lost in her mind. Emily's reflection in the mirror grew stranger, her eyes hollow, her smile too sharp, her shadow stretching too long. The book's power fed on her guilt, twisting her into something inhuman. She longed for an end, but the storyteller's voice hissed in her ear, there is no end. Only the tale. The library's doors creaked open again. Another curious soul stepped inside, and Emily, her hand steady, reached for the book.